we are. So, although it's been a little bit hectic, I mean, first of all, I would like to thank the panelists to have accepted the invitation to join this discussion. I will mute, I will go out of here. In particular, Giacomo Chiari, Susan Corr, Mafalda Costa, Mylène Gilles, Luis Sosa, Deolinda Tavares, Luca Pezzati, Rocco Mazzeo, Matthias Rich, I think I already mentioned, and Stefano Ridolfi, and also Patricia Mestre. So today I will just start. I would like to start actually, not me giving the presentation, but it's just 2 or 3 slides and not much, just to introduce the topics and the questions and the debate. I would like each of the panelists just to briefly, of course, I'm welcoming also the people that are in the public to introduce themselves and saying who they are and why they are here, basically. So in terms of, I will start with Giacomo. Giacomo, can you please introduce yourself?
Well, I'm twice retired, probably obsolete for being in this panel, and I probably should not be here. Go ahead.
But what have you been doing in cultural heritage and conservation?
Oh, I worked for a long time at the University of Torino, and then I was the chief scientist of the Getty Conservation Institute for about 11 years.
So I think it's good that you are here.
All right. Thank you.
Luis.
Good morning. I'm Luis Souza from Brazil. I'm currently director of the SECOR, Center for Conservation and Restoration of Cultural Heritage at the Federal University of Minas Gerais. And I also coordinate the LACICOR Conservation Science Lab. We are now in Brazil dealing with the recognition of the profession of conservation restoration. And we are at the very last stage. I'm happy to be here with you.
Thank you very much, Luis. Luca Pezzati.
Hi, everybody. I'm Luca Pezzati. I am a physicist working at the National Institute of Optics in Italy. I am the coordinator of the Hyperion HS project, which is the last European project leading to what will be the European research infrastructure for heritage science. And maybe that is why I'm here. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Luca. Pedro Redol.
Good morning, Nick and everybody. I am senior curator and have been for 35 years now to the Monastery of Batalha, a UNESCO site in Portugal. And I'm also invited lecturer to the Universidad Nova de Lisboa, the conservation department. I would say, like Giacomo, I'm not quite right whether I'll be very useful in this discussion, but you have invited me, Nick, and I think you will know probably what the use of it will be. So thank you.
Okay, Pedro, of course you are useful because you are also part of the Direção Geral do Patrimônio Cultural as a Monastero Batalha, so you could contribute, and you are an art historian, if I think.
Yes.
By background.
Yes.
Okay, Susan.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Well, I'm a paper conservator, and I have been president of the European Confederation of Conservative Restorers in Europe for 7 years. The last 7 years, I retired last year. And I'm also involved in the Charter project, which is doing 2 things. It's devising or addressing what is the landscape of cultural heritage practitioners, what is cultural heritage in Europe, and how do the competences of the professionals working in heritage fit into this? So when I see defining key knowledge, competence and skills for the profession of the conservation scientist, we did this for the conservator restorer back in 2010 with ECHO. So I suppose that's why I'm here through Nick. Thank you.
So the question was not, it was Giacomo that started to say why I'm here, but you don't need to say why I'm here. Okay, we have a monster with two heads from Evora, which is well, not a monster, two graces. Sorry, that was a gaffe. That was a typical gaffe by Nick Schiavone. Mylène, you want to start?
Yes, and I'm going to say why I'm here, because I believe it was very nice introduction by Giacomo. So I'm, good morning, everybody. I'm Mylène Gil. I'm a researcher of Hercules Laboratory. And I believe I'm here because I'm a classical example of a conservator restorer that go back to the university to complement their scientific knowledge and skills to become heritage science researcher. That's what I do for the last 12 years here at Evora University.
Thank you, Mafalda.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a geologist who's been working in heritage science since I became the first guinea pig edition of Archmat, of the master's degree. So thank you, Nick. I'm also here because Nick asked. I work in Hercules Laboratory since 2014. So I think I can contribute because I actually am somewhere in between a scientist and a heritage scientist.
Thank you, Mafalda. Rocco, do you want to say something?
I don't know. Rocco Mazzeo, I'm a chemist from the University of Bologna. Devoted my entire career to the development of this professional profile of conservation scientist. And I'm doing a lot of things here that probably will come out afterwards when I will take the floor to introduce my thought about this issue.
Thank you very much, Rocco. Stefano?
Yes, hi to everybody. My name is Stefano Ridolfi. I'm a physicist. I'm head of Ars Mensura, a private company that was born 22 years ago. In these 22 years, we were able to do research and to develop instruments by only using private money that was gained by making actual jobs in conservation and cultural heritage scientific analysis. Thank you.
Okay, so may I go to Patricia Mestre, who's also, I think, part of a small medium enterprise. Please, Patricia.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much, Nicola, for the invitation. My name is Patricia Mestre. I am a conservator, restorer for 25 years. And I am at the moment the head of the conservation department of a company called Archaeology, based in Lisbon, but it works all over the place in Portugal. And basically, I reckon I was invited for this meeting in order to give my contribution about how useful and how important it is, the contribution of the conservation scientist towards the conservation business, in order for us to be able to understand and develop and study and to give a better contribution to our work. And that's it. And I'm talking from Lisbon at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Should I say last but not least? No. It's still not last but not least. Matija Sric from Slovenia.
Thank you so much, Nick. Can you hear me? Yeah. Like everybody, I'm waiting to be told what I'm doing at this round table. But I guess I'm looking forward to a very interesting discussion. My name is Matija Starlic. there's some electron density of me in many places around the world. I'm professor of heritage science at University College London. I'm professor of analytical chemistry at University of Ljubljana, and I am a senior research fellow at the Museum Conservation Institute at the Smithsonian Institution. This probably reflects a bit of soul searching on my part, because related to what we're going to be discussing today, I find that finding my own identity in a field which we now call heritage science has been a journey. And a few years ago, in 2010, I established what was then the first master's in heritage science, then at the University College London. And as you might imagine, in a large university of the size of UCL, establishing such an enterprise was quite a big task. And it felt like convincing the Vatican that we need to do something new. So it required a lot of policy documents. We relied on a lot of what Rocco has done beforehand. But it was a very successful master's, and that led to an 8 million euro project to develop 60 PhD students in heritage science in the UK. I'm saying this because all of these initiatives required a lot of academic groundwork in line with the discussion today, so I'm really looking forward to this discussion. In addition, I lead the Heritage Science Academy initiative within the Hyperion Heritage Science Project, and in the future European Research Infrastructure for Heritage Science, which aims at the development of a joint identity for what we currently see as heritage science, and where conservation science might find its home in the future, or has found its home already. So development of the identity for the field and strengthening that identity is very much central to my core interests. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mattia. And I think now is the right to say last but not least, Deolinda Tavares. Please, Deolinda. I saw Deolinda that was connected. Maybe she got out 1 second. Okay. Deolinda, are you with us? Hello? Oh, maybe she exit 1 moment.
She sent a message to the chat saying she had some problems with the connection.
Yes.
Oh, yes, it's true. But she still look connected in the system. So let me see. Chat. I'm having some problem. When? Are you 10 minutes ago? Okay. Try to get out and come back. Time to get out and come back. Okay.
Hello, Giovanni.
Okay, but in the meantime, that Deolinda managed to get inside I mean, I would like just to. I'm not going to give a presentation, of course, but I would like just to throw some thoughts in order to as a platform for starting the discussion. So I will just I have prepared just a very short presentation, not many slides at all. It's just to stimulate you for the discussion. Can you see my screen? Mm-hmm. Okay. So welcome to this roundtable that called Defining Key Knowledge, Competence and Skill for the Professional Conservation Scientists. This roundtable was supposed to be part of a summer school, of the second summer school, which is one of the training network event of the EDACMAT project. And then due to problems mainly related to COVID, we had to postpone, and then now the summer school has been reduced to this round table, which I think in any case that it should be important and fruitful, and with some outputs, some concrete outputs in terms of recommendations and letter writing to policymakers. Okay, as you know, the study of conservation of cultural heritage object involves inherent multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary skills that have to be acquired by the people involved in conservation of cultural heritage. And these skills are spanning across humanities, science, project management, and even other fields. Oops. And so during the past years, decades, actually, because this process has started in the late 70s, I would say, but if not even before that, and Rocco can actually tell us about it, because he's always been in this field since its very, very birth. There has been a shift going between a multi to transdisciplinary approach to conservation science and conservation as a whole, and cultural heritage studies as a whole. Now, as has been anticipated even in the presentation of many people here, of the panel, of many experts of the panel, we are going towards also a redefinition of conservation science, and many people now are adopting heritage science. And even if we look into some of the journals that are devoted to cultural heritage studies and research, you can see that we have all scientific aspects, theoretical issues, but then again, we are starting even to talk about heritage management as part of a cultural heritage research, economic analysis, computer sciences, impact of climate change, and so forth. So the field has broadened dramatically in the last, I would say in the last 20 years, particularly in the last 20 years. So a few topics that could be discussed, and this is not an exhaustive, and I'm looking forward also to collateral damage coming out from, not damage, collateral thinking coming out from this debate. The higher education courses in conservation science, which an overview, and do we need to adapt curriculum? And again, I will. Don't worry, Rocco, I will let you speak much, you can speak much better than me into this topic. Then, as Mattia was saying, conservation science is a question of identity. Is there a need for updating the definition of conservation science? Again, heritage science maybe is more comprehensive, is a more comprehensive definition. Then employability, because this is actually what sparkled the idea, the very, very idea, not only of the roundtable, of the EDARCHMAT European Joint Doctorate Project that I'm coordinating since 2018 with a number of partners. What are the current job market needs for conservation scientists, or for heritage scientists for that matter? And how can we achieve a truly successful interaction between conservation science and conservation practice, i.e. Between conservation scientists or scientists for conservation or heritage scientists and conservator restorers? So maybe we need to expand and deepen our relationship and smoothen some of the different opinion, respecting the opinion of both sides, because nobody is above the other in this. We are in a team. So the goalkeeper is not better than the attacking colleagues. And future challenges. So if just to give you some pills, the training in conservation science, usually conservation scientists have been trained in natural science topics, mainly chemistry, or usually chemistry, which subsequently was applied to conservation science. So this was the original training protocol. But there have been a few conservation science dedicated programs. Of course, I'm biased, and I quoted here my program, the program I coordinate. But of course, there has been others, as Mattia was saying, as Rocco will say, but not that many dedicated to conservation science or science for conservation. And to stimulate also Susan, this is something that Susan Core did back in 2016 and 11 actually, when she devised a table. I'm not going to talk about the table. In fact, it's so small that you couldn't even read. But can you see the colors? These are the different competence, knowledge, and skills for conservator restorers. That document, as Susan will probably talk about, we're dealing with the knowledge, competence, skills of conservator restorers as opposed to conservation scientists. But it was mainly dedicated to conservator restorers. And you can see the purple there. The purple indicates proficiency, excellent proficiency. And it appears that, you know, the conservator restorer has got a lot of slots of proficiency, high proficiency, and the conservation scientist a little bit less. So that actually was what attracted my attention. I said, why not don't we debate something this in the project? And terminology issue, as we're saying, this is also important. I mean, this is the conservation science, one of the conservation science definition that we can, as a scientific domain, very similar to the one I mentioned with the training. But now we are seeing heritage science increasingly being adopted as a definition, as a main definition, and even the HERIS and the Hyperion HS heritage science. But this is just not natural science. There also include areas of digital, big data, and so forth. So the definition has to be updated. And not heritage science and conservation science they're not intrinsically, and they are intrinsically connected, but they're not synonymous. And so we drop the conservation science definition. So we go, everybody calling ourselves heritage scientists, the ex-conservation scientists of the past. But are we demanding too much for conservation scientists? So there was, of course, somebody in the past that was a conservator, an artist, a project manager, a businessman, a disseminator, that in the ECHO guidelines terms, which are the tables that Susan Core devised a few years ago, would have reached well beyond the European Qualification Framework level 8, which is the level of the doctorate, as you all probably know. And maybe we are demanding a little bit too much from our graduates in conservation science or heritage science. But I dropped the last spiel. I think that the main, I mean, and maybe I'm anticipating too much, but please say, no, you're wrong, Nick. No, we think differently from you. Your presentation was totally crap. Please don't be afraid. This is a debate, and we have to be humble. Everybody has to be humble, conservators and conservation scientists. Nobody has the truth. But my opinion, this is actually what we should aim to act. So the conservator and the conservation scientists or heritage scientists, they're working together towards breaking language barrier because we need to speak, achieving true disciplinarity, adding value to conservation project. I put question marks because again, I just throw this the stone in the pond, and I want the expert here. So I will not talk too much after this. This is what is. I will let you argue, debate, and discuss. Okay, so let's go out of this. For instance, can I ask Rocco, if you will, to give some sort of overview, your own assessment of what has been happening in the last 20 years in the field of education, training?
Well, thank you, Nick. I cannot be. I don't want to be long in my presentation, but in any case, we need to start from what I do consider the beginning of all the discussion related with the profile of conservation scientists. When I was working at ICROM as responsible for Science for Conservation program from 1998 to 2002, before arriving here in Bologna, the main goal of my project were exactly the definition of the profile of conservation scientists. This ended up with a document that because it was organized and hosted by the University of Bologna, we called it the Bologna document. No, we wanted to be a little bit ambitious on that. But that Bologna document, in that Bologna document, the knowledge, skill, way of education of a conservation scientist was approved by a panel of experts coming from all over the world, not only scientists, but also conservators. I do remember Bernd Escher was there, Ulrich Schissel was there. So all the top gun conservators also participated in that discussion, which was really a very fighting discussion. But at the end, we arrived to a sort of compromise. The results of that document was another achievement that I got while was at ICROM, to develop a curriculum related with the training and education of a conservation scientist. The project was funded by the European Union. It was a 3-year project that saw the participation of different institutions, not only scientific research in conservation institutions, but also conservator, restorer, and so on. And at the end of this project, that was the starting point for me to justify the need to establish, when I was appointed by the University of Bologna, to establish to set up a master degree in science for conservation, which is an international master degree that started to be that was approved by the university in the year 2009, and it started from the academic year 2009-2010, and is now still alive. I mean, we have mainly in a kind of 25 students from all over the world, and it is also a double degree with the University of Nanjing in China. So we have students getting both the master degree here in Bologna and the master degree also in China from the Nanjing University. And the characteristic point of this master degree is that it is interdisciplinary. So if you look at the courses that are there are courses belonging to chemistry, to physics, to biology, to mineralogy, but also courses provided by conservator restorer, with the aim not to make them becoming conservator restorer, but just with the aim to letting them understanding which are the needs from the point of view of conservation restoration when applied to the needs in terms of material constitution, state of conservation, development of new material for restoration, new materials and methods for restoration. So this master course is quite unique, as probably you know. I mean, there are not that many other examples similar to these. To this course.
Sorry, Morocco, but do you have this document, the Bologna document?
Yes, I have, of course.
Can you show us to I know that is old, but I think it is a milestone.
Well,
in a way.
It dates back to the 1999.
Because I think there were actually interesting definitions in this and recommendation in this document.
Yes, I think that.
But although you are getting too much monopoly, you have the Bologna process, the Bologna document. Oh my God!
That is why.
Give us a little space to the others.
That is why. Can you see the document?
Yes, I can.
Everybody can.
I think everybody can.
Okay, so you see it dates back to the 26th and 27th of November 1999. It was the results of a survey carried out by ICRON, by Marisa Laurenzi Tabasso, who was in charge of the same position before going retired and being substituted by me. And the opinion expressed by the seminar participants stressed that, considering the increasing number of initiatives in the field of conservation and preservation of cultural heritage, there is a growing need for participation of conservation scientists in various activities. So that was 20-something years ago. And this is the definition. If you want, I can read this definition because in my opinion, is still valid. A conservation scientist today can be defined as a scientist with a degree in one of the natural, physical, and or applied scientific discipline, and with further knowledge in conservation, such as conservation ethics, history, cultural values, historical technology, past and present conservation technology and practice, specific scientific aspect, etc., which enables him or her to contribute to the study and conservation of cultural heritage within an interdisciplinary team. Today, what are the functions that describe the role of conservation scientists? Study, investigate, define, develop, and evaluate conservation concept, provide diagnosis before, during, and after, conduct research on causes and mechanisms of deterioration, and interpret scientific results. The interpretation of scientific results is another key moment. Communicate the scientific principle of conservation and promote scientific research in conservation. Cooperate with other disciplines. So you see, this is a function. The cooperation with other disciplines was identified as a real function. These are the basic knowledge that skills that needs to be that the conservation scientist needs to have. How can a scientist be educated in order to acquire this knowledge, and blah blah blah. Okay, so apart from, and I mean, it is useless that now we read it because I can share this document with all of you. I mean, I can send this document to all of you because it is part of,
22 years after.
22 years.
Do you think that this document has produces the desired effects?
I think so, because I do think, at least from my perspective, from an Italian perspective, that was a very important document. You have to know that now in Italy, I was asked by the Ministry of Culture and Education to be part of a panel for the reorganization of the different profiles that are now that were active into the Ministry of Culture to end up with a profile, unique profile, and this profile is a conservation scientist. And the Ministry of Culture has been, this new profile, which reflects a lot of what is saying here, was approved, which means that from now on, if there are concourse, if there are job position, the job position are clearly identified through, and thanks also to this document. There are no money in Italy, so there is no tomorrow something that will happen tomorrow, this new position. But in any case, now there is a job description very clear, and there is also it is also said which are the educational background needed to enter this job position.
Okay. So this in Italy. Can I actually turn to Mattia? What to the same question? Do you think, Mattia, that we have achieved, we have moved forward from this document, and now the situation is has improved in a way, or has changed, evolved?
Thank you very much, Rocco, and of course, Nicola. I think it depends very much on the country in question. Obviously, Italy has made enormous progress in this field. In the UK, where I've been involved in the development of the field a little bit more in the past 15, 20 years, maybe, with the Houses of Parliament inquiry in 2006, it was established that the field of conservation science, as well as the fields of, for example, building conservation and archaeology or archaeological science, need to be somehow seen as under the umbrella of what was then coined as the term of heritage science. So it wasn't considered that conservation science and archaeological sciences and building conservation science should be developed as three separate fields. Rather than that, these fields were merged under the umbrella of, under the very broad umbrella, I must say, of heritage science. In this context, we must understand the meaning of the term science in British English, which of course involves experimental sciences or natural sciences, if you like, whereas on the continent, for example, in Francophone countries or in Central Europe and elsewhere, the term science could mean humanities, social sciences, etc., etc. And I feel sometimes that beneath this large confusion are the many assumptions that people make about the meaning of the terminology that we're using. And that terminology is riddled with various identity issues. This is why in 2019, in a collaboration between ICROM and the community of the Research Infrastructure for Heritage Science, we organized a big debate which lasted, I think, almost half a year. Luca is laughing because he remembers that. We coined a definition for heritage science which reflects this diversity and which reflects the intensive interdisciplinarity that we're developing. I think in many ways, I see the stage of development of our field on a very similar level as perhaps environmental science found itself in the 1960s, or maybe a little bit later, when biologists and climate scientists and physicists, etc., came together and coined this new term. It took a very long time for environmental science to become an academic discipline, and it took even longer for environmental science courses to crop up in university curricula. We are in that phase. We have less than 10, perhaps, master courses at various European universities teaching conservation science as a formal course. We have very few doctoral courses that focus specifically on conservation science or heritage science. So we are in that primordial soup, if you like, where we are developing our identity. We are trying to convince employers that there is a profession where our trainees will find employment, and we have some level of success there. However, there are very few jobs with the title of conservation science or heritage science, but I don't think that this should deter us from what I believe around this table we feel we should do, i.e. to develop our identity as a field. Whether that is conservation science or heritage science, which seems to be becoming more popular in many countries, is open for debate, of course. But I feel that looking at the skills that we are developing in our curricula and that are intensely interdisciplinary and sit at the crossroads between humanities, social sciences, and natural sciences, I feel that there is a need for such profiles in the industry. Out of the 60 PhD students that I mentioned were trained by the Doctoral Training Center in the UK, less than half have found jobs in heritage institutions and heritage industry. But that doesn't worry me. I think that we have developed those trainees, we have developed those doctors of heritage science with an understanding of collaborative working, with an understanding of interdisciplinarity that is probably not being developed in any other university course. And the fact that they have been able to find jobs in the industry, I find, is a success for the course, because it clearly shows that there is a need in the industry more generally for such profiles. So I feel that in terms of the identity development, we need to see the three pillars of any scientific disciplines as quite distinct and yet as very connected. On the one hand, we have academia providing formal education. So there is an academic pillar, which involves research, obviously, in our field. There is the infrastructure pillar, which is intensively being developed, no small thanks to Luca, of course. And there is also a finance pillar. So we obviously need to be funded from somewhere. So, and that involves intensive collaboration with decision makers and policymakers. And I feel that on all three fronts, we are making intensive progress currently. Academically, I still feel we are lacking somewhat this identity. I know that there is a heritage science textbook in development by Springer Nature. So each academic field requires its own canon of books, its own canon of theories. And I'm not entirely convinced that in heritage science or conservation science, we have that canon. So as academics, we need to think about that as well. I'm sorry, Nick, if I responded to your question in a very roundabout way.
I'm going to do the bad policeman, so I will cut people because I want many people to intervene. So please don't get offended if I cut you. I'm the Bruno Vespa of the situation, okay? Sorry, people not outside Italy don't know who Bruno Vespa is. He's a famous journalist. Okay, can I actually go to the other side of the world, both in terms of gender and in terms of background? Can I get into discussion Susan, who's a conservator restorer? And actually, sorry, I put conservator in the and not conservator restorer.
Sure.
But please, you are a conservator restorer. What do you think? I mean, you
I'm fascinated.
were one
I'm
of the
fascinated here. I'm listening, fascinated.
you were one of the people that devised the two tables that
I didn't know
prompted
we had done
my-
one for a conservation scientist. That was never published. Did you make that one up?
No,
I've
no,
never
no. It
seen
was
that
actually in the document. Well,
Not in the published one.
Well, I found it in PDF. I mean,
Wow. Oh, that's very
so
interesting.
there is a leak here. There is a
Yes, yes, yes. I
WikiLeak
never
here.
thought we had even gone there.
Well, it was mentioned anyway, but let's set aside that. I mean,
Let's
what
set
do you
aside
think
that.
is the relationship and the needs for between conservator restorers and conservation scientists, in your opinion, or heritage scientists?
Well, there's a lot going on here. There's an awful lot to say. First of all,
I know.
an awful lot to say. And I mean, you know, I'm 30 years practicing as a conservator restorer, and those competences for the profession of the conservator restorer was an attempt to do exactly what you're doing now, to distinguish what it is that we do. And one of the first things any conservator restorer, I think, would say is that, in fact, they are a scientist in that humanities way, that they do approach, if science is a rational appraisal of, you know, a rational and objective appraisal of facts and a methodology that you try and apply, that is not quackery, but that has some scientific basis when you come to take decision-making in your conservation restoration processes. Of course, it absolutely has to be something that is quantifiable. And I suppose in making those decisions quantifiable, you do need scientific data. And certainly the conservator restorer has always been trained to analyze and understand the data, or where maybe the information is required. But even for the conservator restorer, the field, it is multidisciplinary now. It is incredibly involved, the decision-making. And I think also this heritage industry that you're talking about is terribly underdeveloped, because even, you know, from the point of view that Europe recognizes that each, you know, there's a huge political dimension to this going on across Europe, that Europe itself, the EU, has never seen itself as having competences in heritage. So each country has been allowed to develop its own competences for whoever practitioners they see are professionals working in heritage, not only because heritage is the competence of each country, but that therefore it requires different types of professionals. And the EU has realized, I suppose, that heritage is, the EU is not an economic project for it to survive in the conditions it now finds itself. It's about social cohesion and about the amount of immigration coming in, people with different identities, people having to live together. And so this heritage practice that we're all talking about has become hugely multivalent and multidisciplinary in output. And so the conservator restorer also has to find themselves now in this landscape. And when we talk to you as conservation scientists, what is your distinct role in respect to the conservator restorer? What is your identity? How do you distinguish yourself? A conservator restorer already has 5 years training in conservation restoration. I notice in your Bologna document, you're looking for 4 or 5 years in pure science, what I would say as natural, physical, or chemistry. And now it's, yes, how much do you want? Are you now as, sorry if I pronounce your name, Matli from Slovakia? Do you start already with, like the environmental scientist, the conservation scientist is now there from the beginning and it's already directed at conservation?
Sorry, he's from Slovenia, not
Slovenia. Sorry, Slovenia, excuse me. So it's very interesting to see. So when you put up the very questions you are asking, like in it, I recognize the conservator restorer in all that you are doing there. So what distinguishes us from being a conservator restorer and a conservation scientist? We're very close, but you'll have to also look at what distinguishes us if you want a professional profile, if you want different competences. And
I mean, the main question, one of the questions is, do we need a professional profile, a professional role, recognized, accredited?
I think so. Yes, I would think so. Because the conservator restorer like that will find where this is the thing. The field is growing enormously, and the conservator restorer cannot do everything, no more than the conservation scientist can. And what, you know, where the point, the crunch comes, I suppose, is in the application. How do you apply the knowledge? Is it the conservator restorer is using the data? Is it data that you're collecting and creating, you know, to apply it in conservation restoration treatments? There's huge value judgments to be made in how far you can carry treatments, because now they are conditioned by people's response to them and how long they are valuable for. And there's a huge change in the democratic decision-making process of how we even identify heritage and who is heritage for. This is affecting the practice of the conservator restorer, and it will affect the practice of the conservation scientist. Are you collecting? What are you measuring? And what are you allowing us understand if we are putting things into practice? And I think this is where it's changed hugely for the conservator restorer, these decision-making processes. So I don't know whether this is answering any your questions, but the fact is that is there another conservator restorer present? I think we need to work far more closely. I have very little contact.
Okay. I mean, you prompted me to ask, for instance, in Évora we have Mylène Gilles. I mean, she's a hybrid.
Yes.
So I would like to ask her, what do you think, Mylène?
I totally agree with Susan. I went back to the university to complement my knowledge, scientific knowledge, because I was trying to reach the conservation scientists and I was unable, there was really an abysm, a gap between our two fields. And so I had the need to come back because I'm sorry if I don't want to offend anyone, because I have my experience of 27 years as a conservator restorer as well. So I had the need to come back to the university and to do scientific, to complement and increase my scientific background, because I was not reaching the other parts. Sometimes I was not even allowed to enter a laboratory to work with a scientist. So I believe, time evolved. There is a huge evolution here, at least here in Portugal. We start to really cross-link both sides, but I believe here the definition, and I was speaking even to Mafalda, the definition must be more, as Mattia already said, must be more broad. We need really to work on that. So I completely identify with Susan's concerns as a conservator restorer. Yes. And Mafalda has something that she could add as well. I believe she is very interesting as well. If you allow me, Nick.
Of course. I mean, this is an open discussion. So anybody can intervene. I mean, not even prompted by me. If you want to raise your hands, please do.
Me and Mylène were talking about this even when we were asked to be part of this panel. For me, I don't identify as a conservation scientist. I identify as a heritage scientist, because for me, a conservation scientist is always working on conservation. That's the main idea behind any study that they're doing, is to preserve an object, right? And for me, what I do on a day-to-day basis, because what I work on is glass and I work on provenance, I'm not looking to answer questions about conservation of those objects that I'm studying. I'm looking to answer questions about the population, civilization that produced those objects, and to answer questions about the world at that period. So the questions are completely different. It's not that my research cannot then be used also for conservation. It's that my questions are not based on conservation problems. And so I don't agree with the definition or defining all of us as conservation scientists. I think we are heritage scientists first. And I also don't think that it's a good idea to try to branch this umbrella into different classes, because then we will have conservation scientists, we will have archaeological scientists, we will have built heritage sciences, we will have natural heritage sciences. And then, I mean, we again have a problem of we don't talk to each other, because everyone is in their little box and they don't have contact, and we don't have any type of of interplay and overlap. And so I think it's important to keep this definition as broad as possible, exactly to avoid putting everyone in boxes.
Thank you very much. I see that Patricia wanted to intervene, and she's an archaeologist, conservator archaeologist, please.
I'm a conservator restorer, and I did my MSc at UCL, Institute of Archaeology, a long, long time ago. And I couldn't agree more with Milan and with Susan, because mainly, and also at the same time with Mafalda, because yes, we cannot, let me put my hand down, because mainly we should not separate everything into little boxes, yes. But at the same time, we have to support each other with the knowledge, exactly because, as Susan said, the conservator restorer are on a site. We have to make decisions. We have to think about what we're going to do. And the tools that we use in order to make those decisions are supplied by the scientists, conservation scientists. As Milan was saying, if you are a conservator restorer, you cannot afford to go back into college. Otherwise, you cannot put it into practice. All the skills you have in order to preserve, conserve, restore the heritage. So basically, we need to help each other. We should not separate. I'm talking about as for an example, every time that we have to make a decision, if there is a decision that I have to do, if I have some difficulties, I'll go and read all the articles I possibly can that adjust, scientific articles, to adjust to the decision making that I have to make. And the thing is, we don't have much time to study about it. When we are on site, when we are doing some conservation work, there is a timeline that we have to obey. And during that time, we have to make that decision. And we don't have sometimes time or money also to send some samples to the lab and wait for some answers, and then they come back, and then we have a decision to make, because that's not possible in the business world when we are working on the site. It's not possible. They don't give us that amount of time and money also for that. So
it's nice that you introduce this. You introduce the difference between academic research, the timings of the academic research and training with the real world, let's say, the business world, where you need to provide answer quickly, and you have a deadline, a quick deadline to perform the work.
Exactly. What I was trying to say is that we should not, to conclude my idea, we should not separate the professions, because we are all interlinked. I need them, and we really need them when we are doing conservation. When we are putting it into practice, they are our most important tool. Of course, historians, physicists, everything. We all rely on each other, but that we put it into practice, we do rely 100% on them. And that's it. Sorry. I hope you all
Rocco,
understood.
do you want to raise your hand? You want to intervene?
I did
Yes,
too, later on, okay?
Yes, very. Giacomo, do allow me just a couple of minutes, and then I will.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Giacomo. No, I think that there is no discussion, in my opinion, that the big umbrella of heritage science includes all these type of profession: conservator, restorer, conservation scientist, project manager, archaeological science. That is why the idea and the concept of heritage science is now becoming very common. I mean, it is approved. It is that much approved that in Italy, for example, we established the first national PhD in heritage science. And if you look on how it is subdivided, it is subdivided into 11 curriculum that are broad enough to cover all the type of professional profile involved. I am responsible, for example, for the curriculum which is called Science and Technology for Cultural Heritage, but there are others that are digital humanities in cultural heritage. There are other curriculum that deals with project management, with archaeological management, and so on. They are all involved in that. So there are examples now. We are already in this view. We are already in. I mean, nobody can say something against the idea that there is heritage science, and I do agree with Mattia. Probably there is no need to have a professional profile established like the one that of conservator restorer. I mean, we are doing things. We need to collaborate each other. And one of the examples that I found the best example of collaboration were the training camp that we organized since, I don't remember when, 2014, 2016, with the Hyperion project led by Luca Pezzati. In that occasion, and I'm sure that Giacomo agree with me, that was a fantastic occasion because you had an object or a monument or whatever, a cultural heritage material that needs to be, that provides type question, and around that object there were conservator restorers, scientists, art historians, or archaeologists discussing together which is the role that each of them could play for the safeguard of that type of object. So the possibility now to be trained also in this way, in an interdisciplinary way, is something that will continue, because I am sure we will continue. I am still responsible within the Hyperion HS of this training camp or doctoral summer school, and they are really very effective. They are very liked, very appreciated by participants. So I don't see really a big problem. The problem is that every profile, or each profile that is working within this heritage science should recognize which are the competences of each of them, so that they, working together, can answer questions. And there are examples, concrete example. This PhD that now is established on heritage science in Italy is going to become a PhD at a European level. In fact, the Una Europa Consortium, which is a consortium now of 12 European universities, of which the University of Bologna is part, is going, to copy this example and to use this example to establish a European PhD in heritage science in collaboration with different universities. So
Sorry, Rock, I'm really going to cut you across there. What is the outcome of the PhD? You said there was 9 or 11 different components to it?
Yes, they will all get a PhD in heritage science.
In heritage science? Yes, I do.
Science.
But from what I'm hearing, that includes management, science, art history, or
with different pathway, different pathway.
That is the, yeah, that is.
You will not be trained within. You will not be trained within one curriculum in all these aspects. You understand? So you.
Okay, so there's 9 different components.
Exactly.
To be trained in one.
No.
Can I have Giacomo, who has been not talking so far?
No. That's okay. Let's finish this.
No, I mean, just to.
That's Rocco. That is a university.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Mathematics, whatever. You just put together different things.
No, these are 11 curriculum, okay, aimed at training people in that specific branch, let's say science and technology for cultural heritage, or heritage management, digital humanities, and so on. But they will all get the same type of PhD, which is called heritage science. I don't know whether this is clear. Whether this is clear.
Different curriculum. 11
different curriculum.
With the outcome reaching PhD level.
Reaching PhD level, okay, and they will all get the same PhD, which will be called heritage science, but the students participating in each curriculum will arrive with their competences, with that will be for a natural scientist in science and technology, for an archaeologist in archaeological management, for an ICT guys in digital humanities, and so on. So I don't know whether this is the
okay.
you got
If I can bring back to the discussion of the conservation scientists, the way we see it now, I think it's going to be obsolete. It's going to be extinct completely. And it's going to be pushed out by two different figures. One is the scientist / engineer, tool maker that will make the instrument that we use. Without them, we cannot do anything. What would we do now without an EF little pistol? But no conservation scientists contributed to that. It's a different branch of individual, okay? The other individual, which is more interesting to us, is the melt of a conservation scientist as we see it, restorer, a conservator restorer. And that will happen and that would allow the restorer to make decision instead of asking question and waiting for the result. Will be able to make the question, proper question, and contribute to the result. So how could this happen? According to me, it could happen if you have a training, a person, the same person would have a very basic training in science. And that will mean chemistry, physics, biology, informatics, statistics, how to treat data, how to interpret results, etc., which is extremely important now. And after that, we'll have an equal broad, training, principle of conservation. And then what would happen is what would happen in the Renaissance. An artist, what would do? Would go to a store, a bottega, and learn how to sculpt, if he were going to be a sculptor, or paint, or do whatever. Every one of us, I think, yes.
That already
let me just
exists.
do one more thing. Everybody of us, I think, learn their business by doing it when they start working. The university provided the background, the ability to understand and put together what you would then really learn by doing it in work. So when you start working, you will learn diffraction, you would learn whatever, carbon 14 or whatever you would do. Please. You were saying something.
But sorry, I shouldn't have cut across it, but that already exists in Vienna, in many academic institutions. That's exactly the training that happens.
In Portugal.
Susan, I'm sorry, but in Portugal, we have master's degree in Nova University since the end of the last century, that the students end up with a master in conservation restoration, and they have a very deep training in physical chemistry, biology, everything.
This happens already.
And we have a PhD
Very
in
happy to
conservation
know that
science
what I'm saying is true. We are going to be extinct.
Yes. And I totally agree with Giacomo. I think it's very important to have these two backgrounds, the conservation restoration and knowledge in conservation science, because it's when we are in front of an artwork that we understand what are the really important questions that we can place and how we can reach the answers for it. Even though that we are not able to run the equipment, we know what techniques exist and how deep we can go in the knowledge about the artwork. So it's a training that already exists, and we have a lot of fruits coming from that since more than 20 years ago in Portugal.
Yeah.
Good.
I do agree with that. What you said about the Nova, yes, of course it is. It is a major institution here in Portugal. But at the same time, that decision making, that you were saying that people come out with, sometimes there are some challenges that we need to look a little bit more into depth, some more issues that we need. If you are on the field, you require the support of conservation scientists, that they are not in the field, but they are on the scientific background.
Of course.
So our knowledge go until some point, and then we need the help of the scientists, basically, in order to make some adjustment of our treatment, obviously.
And
the
those will be
conservation
the
restorer
scientists.
doesn't live by himself. We really need conservation
Absolutely.
scientists back.
Those will be the scientists.
Sorry, can I
that will
bring
work
into the
on
discussion
that particular
somebody?
field and become expert on that field. And at that
Can I
point,
bring,
of course,
sorry,
they are
Giacomo.
essential. I'm not saying that we should be, you know, at the level of a very superficial level. Go ahead.
No, Giacomo, it's just, I mean, we have been Eurocentric at the moment. Can I bring Luis Souza, who's a view from South America, from Brazil? What is happening in Brazil in this topic?
Well, in Brazil, first I should say that when we did the meeting in Bologna, I was a participant of that meeting, and it was indeed very important for us to set up directions in terms of relationship between scientists and the conservation community. I teach at the Conservation Center, where science has always been very important, you know, natural sciences as tool for teaching, for furthering research so that we can know more about our objects and so on. Nowadays, we are already using the concept of heritage science, but we still have a very long way to go because, for example, our funding agencies, they still don't recognize heritage science as a field of knowledge, for example. So it's difficult when we are going to submit a research project. For example, recently, our National Research Council has opened a call for national institutes for sciences and technology. So we just sent a proposal for a National Institute for Cultural Heritage, dealing with the concept of heritage science. What we see here is that the training, we have not reached the level of training as we have some examples, like, for example, in Portugal. We still need more substantial training in science for our conservator students. But then we need more scientists dealing with this. Another experience that I don't see happening in other parts of the world, and we are following this path here, is, for example, we are now working with the federal police. Not that we are training them as conservation scientists, but our federal police, they have as a constitutional role, they have to protect national heritage. And they have seen, for example, that they need to value artworks because of the combat to money laundering, because of the combat to illicit traffic. So we are training them. So we need to fill some parts. And heritage science concept is very important to us, but it's more restricted to the conservation field. We need to bring more archaeologists, historians, engineers, so that we really will practice heritage science as the concept is. We are trying it, but as I say, we still have a very long way to go. Now, I was recently at the Praga ICOM meeting, General Conference, and that's another field that I see that we are still invisible. Even the conservation profession is not really visible within the museum field. And I'm very sorry to say this, but for example, in an ICOM conference as big as that one, we had one in Milan as well. several of the concepts that we are discussing here, they are even not even known by the community. When we see, I suggest that we all take a very good look at the new definition of museum, which has been recently approved. Because at this definition, within this definition, we talk about inclusion, we talk about diversity. But then it's very interesting because when I talk to my colleagues in the museum field, they really love talking about social museology, inclusion. But as we say here in Portugal, in Brazil, pepper in the eyes of the others, you know, it's very good. They talk about inclusion, but they don't include us as conservators. They don't include us as conservation scientists. The term heritage science is not even discussed within these fronts. So, and this is not just for Brazil. The impression I have is worldwide. So, it's important that we keep pursuing heritage science as a concept, but it's very important that we disseminate the word and bring more people. And this is, I'm trying to practice this with my students now because of this new experience. Now, I'm not saying that the pandemic is over, but the way we can talk to each other now, like we are doing exactly with this meeting, it's much easier for us to reach and to talk between continents. So my impression is that we are in the good direction here in Brazil, but we still have a very long way to go. I was saying, for example, we have never had an indigenous student in our conservation course, and this is a shame for us. I'm discussing this with my colleagues. So the way I see is that it's good, the discussion, but we are far, and the word, we are talking about very different realities. I'm hoping that with the IIC 2024 in Lima, which has already been approved, some of these questions we'll get time in 2 years to go deeper into those and bring this discussion again to Lima so that, you know, we can see some advances.
Okay, thank you. I mean, Mattia wanted to talk, but I mean, I would like also to involve Luca. He has been mentioned many times, and Susan was saying that something about funding. I mean, of
I'm sorry, Nick.
heritage.
Can I just interrupt because otherwise we will keep going back and forth. And I just wanted to ask Rocco something because he said that there's a new PhD in heritage science, and my question is, how does this then translate into jobs for these people? Because what I see, and this is from the perspective of a person that has a PhD for a year, is that there's a problem with what we do and how this translates then into something that's outside academia. We all have PhDs and we all work in this specific thing that we can call it heritage science or we can call it conservation science. I'm not going into that discussion right now. The question is, what do we do afterwards? Because we are going to, and we're talking about training people for the future. And I agree with what's been said that I cannot do the role of a conservator restorer, and I don't want to. I think that that is a specific class and they're very important, and I will never be able to do their work. I can help them, but I will never be able to do their work. But then since we don't have a profession, we also have a problem of what happens to us in the future, because we end up in this limbo where I'm not a geologist anymore, but I'm also not a conservator restorer. So what am I? And what am I to the companies? What am I to the job market?
If you want, well, if you want, I can answer you. I can answer you very quickly by saying that the curriculum has been identified. The different curriculum has been identified exactly by answering a specific request that came out from the Ministry of Culture in terms of job position requests, of type of activities that are still type of professionals that are still lacking within the Ministry of Culture. So we responded to a to a job need. So I am sure that these PhD students will probably not enter into the academic pathway as it was used in the past, but I don't want to define them professional PhD, but they are really something like that because they came out from needs that were raised directly from the field of cultural heritage, and we are answering those needs.
That was
That
what
might
we
be
were
something
told.
specific for Italy, right?
Sorry?
Because I'm not sure that this translates then to all other countries. I think that
Well,
that is one of our big problems.
it is good that at least in one country
No, of
this
course.
exists.
I think I think
Because
it's good.
you know that good things sometimes are copied by somebody else. Why
I
not?
hope so.
I mean,
I hope
when
so.
I first established in 2005 the first PhD in science for conservation, perhaps somebody of you remember it. It was called EPISCON. We trained 13 PhD students. They are all now in very high position all over the world. So, I mean, and that was the first attempt to establish something like that. So I am quite confident that in the future, this can happen.
If I can say something, we didn't do a PhD, we did a regular course, 3+2 in 2003 in Torino, Cultural Heritage. It ended 2 years ago because students understood that they didn't have work, they didn't have jobs. About 10 or 15 students got very good jobs, but abroad. Some are in America, some are in England, in everywhere.
That is why I established my course here in English, and I made it international. In fact, my students, they found a job.
Have it in Italy anyway.
Sorry?
We didn't have, the student did not have jobs in Italy. They have it abroad. They all spoke English, yes.
I mean, can I ask Yuval? He's got his hand raised a long time.
I'd like to comment as well, Nicola, later, if I may.
I mean, it's difficult because many of you are trying to get just a new voice, but I will come back to you, Mattia. Sorry, but Yuval, can I actually, do you have a vision from Israel? A different vision in terms also employability of your graduates, because this is important. The point that Mafalda raised was one of the topics of the round table, and very important for them. We are working for them in a way in academia to get them jobs. Yuval? Okay, Yuval is gone. Mattia, please.
I just wanted to comment a little bit on the educational programs being developed and those that have been developed in the past a little bit more. I think the point was raised that there are differences in terms of national curricula or national education systems, and those play out very differently in different systems. We are all watching attentively what will happen in Italy with this PhD program. I must say that in the UK, we went about establishing something similar in a different way, where we first required all of the PhD students to attend a master course in heritage science, which was a one-year course that delivered content from humanities to social sciences to natural sciences, and that attempted to put everyone on an equal footing. I'm not entirely sure that we succeeded because our students were extremely diverse, coming from many, many different fields, from art history to computer sciences, but at least we attempted. And then they went off to do their 3-year PhDs. So all of them started with a common master's and then ended up doing different PhDs, all under the umbrella of heritage science. So that's a slightly different approach that worked in the UK. I was very interested in Susan's opinion earlier, where she stressed the importance of viewing the conservation profession as a research profession as well, which is my view as well, but I must say that it's not shared everywhere. In many countries, for example, in Central Europe, conservation is taught as an arts subject, and the professionals do not see themselves as researchers. Sadly, as well, because most of the funding that enables groups to exist after they complete their formal education comes from science budgets. And this is where I'd also like to follow up a point that was mentioned earlier, but not quite clearly. I'd like to point out that in most classification systems of scientific and other research subjects, such as Ford or Serif, conservation does not exist as a research subject, and neither does conservation science, and absolutely heritage science does not either. So we are working against systems that are in existence, that have been in existence for a very long time. And in addition, university or academic subjects in Central Europe, we call them habilitation subjects, do not exist in our field. The only university where there is a subject related to what we're discussing today is Bologna, and we know who established that subject. So there are so many directions in which we need to work in order for us to be able to succeed, I feel. But this close marriage between conservation and science, I feel, really needs to be stressed everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Mattia. Can I ask Stefano on the topic that Mafalda raised? I mean, jobs. He's a small and medium enterprise, so he's making a life on this as a conservation scientist. Please,
Yes.
Stefano.
Yes, exactly.
What is your vision?
I wanted to say something.
These young people find jobs?
I wanted to say something exactly after Mafalda raised a point. I think there's a double problem. The first problem is visibility. The world doesn't know what we do and how good we can do things. And the second thing is self-consideration of our research, of our workers, science, heritage scientists. They don't know who they are. And this double point trips over. And so there's no job for us for two reasons. We don't know who we are. We don't know what we offer. And therefore, they don't know what to ask us. This problem raises when, now there's a double velocity. From a certain point, Bologna, the world universities are producing always more PhDs and people extremely prepared in something. At the other side, work does not grow because we are not able to apply what we are learning. So what Mafalda said is a concern for all of us. If you're not able to convince the stakeholders, and when a stakeholder is a cultural heritage owner, a painter owner, or a restorer, there are two different points of view of this world. If you're able to convince them, to show them what we're able to do, all this talking may be useless because we're able to produce wonderful white, how can I say, white buildings, but then all around is nothing. So maybe the most of the time I spent in these last 22 years in working in the world is to show what we are doing. And therefore, when I hear more specialization, many specialized fields in which our students are being formed, I get worried because we don't need accelerators. We need the XRF portable instruments, just to let you understand what I mean. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefano. And Yuval has been a long time with a hand. I mean, please, I'm from Israel. I know that everybody wants to talk, but I need to, I mean, you cannot talk at the same time. But please, Yuval.
Okay, so everybody wants to talk because it's a very lively topic. And obviously there is conservation and restoration. Obviously there is heritage science or archaeological science or whatever we call it. I agree that the terminologies or the names are quite misleading. For example, I dislike the name archaeometry, which is also in use. And yes, there is also conservation science. Of course, conservators for, ever since this profession began, are doing scientific work. They need to characterize materials, processes, post-depositional processes, or whatever. But the nature of this field is, and of course, excuse me if I'm wrong, but the nature is that usually this is a very solist work. In museums, of course, we can see groups of conservators working on topics, but still within them there is a specialization. Big museums, like, in the British Museum, which in my opinion is a good example, conservation, and being one whom for 30 years I analyze and provenance cuneiform tablets, for example, the British Museum conservation unit has ever since 1953 has decided to preserve the cuneiform tablets from Assyria, Babylonia, and so on by firing them in a kiln. It took them 30 years and 30,000 tablets before they realized by conservation research, by TGA, that actually they are not preserving, they are damaging. And on the way, they prevented, for example, archaeomagnetic dating, which we do today to tablets, and many other things. And because of that, and because they always had also a scientific research unit, they decided 30 years ago, in the 1990s, to combine the conservation and the scientific research units, and now they act together. Now, of course, archaeological science, heritage science has its own goals. It's more of an academic discipline, but when you have an archaeological scientist with you in the same unit, you do conservation science, because this is also a research topic. When you, for example, when Professor Emma Angelini, who is with us, is analyzing and simulating degradation processes of metals, this is research, but it has also conservation implications. And for that reason, when I established my university program in archaeomaterials, I had the university rector and the director of the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, which is a big museum having a very big conservation unit, but no conservation science. So they signed the formal agreement that we, as archaeological scientists, provide them with, as much as we can, with conservation research. And what I gain from it is that I can bring, students to train on truly precious and important museum stuff. And on the other hand, we subsidize the whole analysis. So if they need a SEM, which they don't, they just bought now a portable XRF, which is great news, but it's only the beginning. If they need a SEM or a GCMS or an ICP, laser ablation or whatever, we do the analysis. We also publish with the conservators if they want, or the curators, the publications. Just yesterday, Thomas gave a lecture exactly about such a study that we did in the Israel Museum. And so it's a win-win situation. And just for that, in Israel, the antiquities law is a little bit different than the European ones. It is all ran by the state. And now the Israel Antiquities Authority, who built a new national center for archaeology in Jerusalem, they actually hired me in order to try to implement this idea also on the new conservation and scientific laboratories, because conservation science does not begin and end in a laboratory. It also goes to the field. In a country where there are more than 300 permits for excavation every year, every archaeologist actually needs a conservator and also a scientist in the field, because usually they are not trained archaeologists. Also in our small department of archaeology, are not even trained to do the basics in conservation. And so, but on the other hand, they have the freedom to decide when they find, for example, a metal sword in an excavation, or a coin or whatever, they, they can impregnate it with paraloid or what, I don't know, white office glue or whatever they decide, and nobody has any control on that. And so they need somebody, not in every excavation, of course, but in some of them, somebody whom they can call, who is trained with characterization of materials, who can come with a portable laboratory, do the analysis, and of course the conservator to whom all this data can go and be advised. So I do believe that there is, whatever name we call it, there should be, first of all, a flow of information between conservators, scientists, and of course, curators, archaeologists, or whoever is doing the actual work with the artifacts or with the sites or with whatever they find. And this flow of information, because of problems of ego, part of it, I think that, we heard here words like, we don't need this because we have it. Of course, everybody's a little bit trained with, every student of archaeology knows something about conservation, but they are not conservators, and vice versa. So there needs to be more integration of these fields. And I think that just for that, we should define a profession called conservation scientist. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Susan, you raised your hand, but I would like to, if you allow me to get Luca that has to go. So, and he has not spoken yet. If you can have patience. Luca.
Thanks. Thank you, Nick. Sorry, Susan. I have to leave in a few minutes. Sorry. So I have to put my 2 cents on this table. The discussion is fascinating, actually. It demonstrates how hot is this topic still after, well, 20 years, 30 years. I wanted to point out that we are not special in this discussion. We were born and raised in a disciplinary world. Each of you is possibly graduated in something which is very, very specific. And most of you, I think, you continue to believe that the best paper you can publish is the one with one name, yours. So this is the beginning. We start from here. Then we realize that modern science, not just conservation, heritage, modern science has got the problem that specializations are no more enough to advance knowledge where we have to face the real complexity of the world. This is happening in most, perhaps in all scientific, and not only scientific, also humanistic disciplines. So this realization is a fresh one. I put in the chat the title of an illuminating book that, unfortunately, being a book, it needs to be read to grasp the meaning of it. Well, that book is really illuminating. Consilience is about the problem of knowledge. The problem of knowledge, we see one of the faces here in this discussion, coping with heritage, a very complex subject, is too difficult for each and any of our specialization. Full stop. So what can we do? What they are already doing in several places, including the British museums, we stay together. We create groups. So for the moment, my best definition of heritage scientist is one who is capable of working in a team. No solitary work in our field. Otherwise, that is not heritage science no more. Is the specialization of the alone researcher. And my term researcher includes also humanist researchers. Any kind. We try to enlarge the boundary of this new scientific domain, but we didn't want this scientific domain to be yet another specialization. Otherwise, we are back to the starting point. So it's difficult. It's really difficult because of the framework that we have inside our minds. The framework tells us that university means to graduate in something very, very specialistic. And that is a pity, because if you look at all the very complex projects and problems of science, the study of the brain, the study of complex system, even in medicine, the pandemic should be a good example of it. No single science can create something useful against complexity. To understand complexity, there's no single human at work. You need to create teams, exchange knowledge, to be helped by computers, of course. And that is what we are trying to do with heritage science. We are trying to create the experience of working in team. One of the bases of the ERIS, the European infrastructure, is the co-creation of knowledge. That is something that we put in the, let's say, the theory of heritage science as we see it. So it is not an arrival point. It is a journey. I appreciate the definition that I heard today. Become heritage scientist, it's not an arrival point, it's a journey, and it will be always a journey towards helping others to understand what we are working for. It could be preservation, it could be understanding, it could be conservation, it could be management, could be everything concerning heritage. The point is that we need to work in team. And I don't know if this is the moment to change the academic path towards heritage science. Maybe the one that we followed is still applicable. You can specialize in something. Examples are here. Then you can study more another field to understand better the situation. You can do whatever, but above all, I think that you need to get used to working team. You need to get used that you need teamwork to advance knowledge in this field. That's all from my point of view. And thank you.
So basically, interdisciplinarity, this is the name of the game. This is
well, actually, the infrastructure, the European infrastructure of heritage science is still one of the relevant examples of trying to apply interdisciplinarity in science. It's one of the few infrastructures in Europe. That's not the only one. Several research infrastructures are starting being multidisciplinary. But
that could be copied in other continents.
In our field, yes, in our field, we are setting an example because we are trying to cope with a problem which is bigger than us. As I told, this is a problem of modern science, not a problem of heritage management.
Okay. Susan, do you want to contribute to this or to other things?
No, address this and just a couple of things to bring you back a little out again, simply because of the work I'm doing at the moment. And just to pick up on some of the threads that were brought up by Stefano Ridolfi and Yuval and Luca. First of all, yes, the structures are very clear, but then, you know, how we're siloed. But put it this way, you have to recognize we all lifelong learning. So there has to be a way of validating our lifelong learning and then the way we're educated. And when we find ourselves working, our qualifications can end up in the past, they're temporal and they belong in the past. And we have acquired huge amounts of experience and competences as we work in our fields. So yes, we may specialize and start off because we can't do everything, and knowledge is passed on to us, is transferred to us in bite sizes that we can cope with. It's the same with health as well, with the field of health, with anywhere that we are occupied with. And you can say we're siloed into our different areas of preservation or art history or archaeology and whatever. But one of the things that I'm now going to just bring you back to what Europe is trying to do and look at the heritage field as a whole. And all of us, what is the purpose of heritage? And it is very complex, but it is about a value. The word heritage is a value statement. It is a statement of value. And every single one of our jobs, everything that we do is to realize value, amplify it, or transmit it. And this now is seen to be at a European level in this project that they have set up called Charter, to try and understand what are the dynamics of the heritage sector as a sector. And if you like, some people like to see it as an industry, but for a lot of the time, the sector, the people who work in the sector are invisible. They are invisible to statistical analysis from an economic point of view, and we are invisible sometimes to ourselves. And so what this project is trying to do is to make us visible as we operate as a whole in amplifying and realizing value in heritage. And we all have to contribute in that way. That means we require competences in many areas, but to different levels. And my question for you, the conservative restorer is a practicing scientist in many ways, especially with some of the training that's now being developed in the last 20 years. However, and as Patricia said earlier, we still need conservation science. It's at what level it takes off. It's at what depth, where are we going? What is the depth of knowledge that we need? And if we are going to become visible to each other, some of the competences will require to be placed, will have to be, I'm afraid, measured or quantified. This is what you're talking about here. When you're delivering education, and especially university education, you're talking about quantifying the level of knowledge and skills. And I'm afraid this is what we've been asked to do as conservative restorers as well. And so we've hinged it around 4 or 5 main concepts. And this is why when you put up your screen in the beginning, Nico, I could not distinguish my competences from your competences as conservation scientists, but it's just the level at which we may operate at. And somebody else said it requires tools. Who's making the tools to develop these things? An awful lot of conservation as well. Heritage is looking at also ways of addressing the sustainable development goals, so that the value of heritage that we understand is going to now be directed at teaching us how to live in the world more sustainably again. And so it's about looking at ourselves and making heritage visible to the world. And the reasons are, just to bring it back to the sectoral analysis, there is no economic indicator for the work that I do. My work is lost to the economy. I do not have a tax code in the ordinary statistical frameworks that contributes to GDP. There are many people invisible in heritage working in this way. Because it comes from the humanities and it comes from the sciences, and it's a combination. So we're lost as well. We don't know. We're not recognizable to it. And so one of these things that this charter project is trying to do is to create a landscape of heritage practitioners who can be identified for what they are because of their competences. And so we're trying to set up some kind of way of analyzing those competences and where they can be placed, maybe relative to the EQF or maybe relative to lifelong learning. That is something for Europe that it has to decide. But that also there is a statistical analysis of the economic worth that they generate, so that the heritage value can be resourced out of budgets, and the EU are looking at this. So there is a role for understanding that heritage is valuable to the world that we live in, and that we all have to be visible inside this sector. That's all I have to say. I don't have any answers for you, but I think it's the levels also, the competences at which we work.
Thank you very much, Susan. I think we have somebody here in the room, Professor Herman from Zaragoza, that wanted to contribute.
Thank you. Hello to all. This was very interesting. I just wanted to make 4 points very clearly. One is that education and training should be, in this case, transdisciplinary, as they are. nowadays in all of science and in all matters. And it should open our mind and enable us to talk to different specialists in very different disciplines. This is the basis for everything. Education is also the basis for a long evolving career, which enables us to start from the beginning point. We really don't come out with a PhD, with a master's, or with any degree, just knowing anything. We start from zero when we go out into the market, whether that's in academia or whether that is in industry or whatever. Secondly, the jobs are important, but not the main goal of education. The main goal of education should be to serve society, to solve problems in society, to advance society. And in this case, this is what happens with cultural heritage in whatever subdiscipline or however it is focused. It should end up in entrepreneurship, and positions will appear if we do a convincing job within society to those that make decisions in society. So for that, we need to act together from all different points of view and make critical mass and send the message to those who take decisions. Then I would say we must also think that cultural heritage in general, from all the points that have been discussed, is a benefit. It's a great benefit to society. It's a multi-million euro business in where cultural tourism is a big part, among others. And so we must use these arguments. First, we must convince ourselves and look at the data, at the economic data of how important this is. And secondly, we must use this to convince those that make decisions in society. And finally, I should make a similarity between what we are talking about now and what started in the 1950s and 60s with what is now called material science. Material science was depicted as something new, and it was not science at that time. Physicists and chemists said, this is not science. Physics is science, chemistry is science, material science is not science. And it took years to be recognized in material science. And now material science is one of the greatest scientific areas, recognized with tremendous advances in academia, in industry, in medicine, and in all areas where science and technology have something to do. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Herman. Very clear and quick statements, but very clear. So basically, you are saying that we need to change the society and make the society creating jobs.
Nick, I'd like
So
to
we cannot
interpret-
wait for people giving jobs.
No.
We need to create
Nick.
Let me clarify
Nick.
this.
Nick.
Let me clarify this. You know, I'm a chemist. I started as an inorganic chemist, then I worked with molecular chemistry, and now I do something completely different. I ended up using lasers, and it's completely different. Nobody could predict, even in the USA where I did my studying, that I would get a job guaranteed by what I was studying. This I found out later. I started from zero when I came out into the market. And so this is my message. You cannot just do a PhD to look for a job. Of course, it's something that will enable you to get a job, but you should do what you like, and you should be trained thoroughly to be able to do any job. And this is the job market itself. We cannot affect the job market. This is a big, huge structure which you cannot push to one side or the other. This is the job market. But we must generate the need. We must demonstrate there is a need in cultural heritage, which generates lots of money with tourism, with businesses that are affected. And you can see in Burgos, you have, of course, in Israel, this is huge. In Spain and Italy, this is a huge part of the gross national product. In France also. So we must convince our decision makers that what we are doing, whatever discipline we agree on or we push forward to train young people, that they need to absorb this, to improve cultural heritage, to maintain it, and to maintain the economic vastness of this giant. Okay, that's what I.
So
Nick,
we have
I
ESR,
really
so
need
from the
I really need to say something over here because the question that
Yes,
is the
I
most
wanted to give you
important-
the word.
because the
worry,
question that is
Sri.
most important right now is, we are how many? In one consortium, we are 13 people. There's a huge vacuum between the students receiving their diploma and finding jobs and, or fundings to get a job. And it is becoming really difficult. So are you saying that being in academia is absolutely, like, we shouldn't be in academia because there are no jobs? Is that where we are going to? Because then you should be very upfront about saying that to us. And it is
I
a
don't
very
think that
important.
Herman was talking about remaining in academy at all.
It's not about that. It's just like it is very important that we think that, yes, okay, we have different fields, we are working in different fields. Every one of us graduating is transdisciplinary. So how would you like to place us in this world? Like, we are also coming with a set of knowledges. We would like to give input with heritage studies. So what is our place?
I can clarify that for you. I can tell you one thing. If you are the best in what you do, you will have a job somewhere. It's not, remember, it's a globalized market for you. You will not have a job exactly where you want to necessarily, but if you are well prepared, and I know many cases of this with companies that I know and in the public sector, and it's the how you get prepared and the quality that you have, the understanding level that you have. This is what gets across, and this is what gets you a job. Where, you don't know.
But not everyone can be the best. By definition.
Not
So
only
I want
not everyone can
Anna
be the best,
Fondorulic.
but
No,
not
sorry,
everyone
now,
recognizes when a person is the best, because you can be the best and people might not recognize it, because that might not be translatable through your CV, through your contacts. That might not pass through. So sometimes it's not known, it's not visible. So that's not real. It's a real problem. We are people that are not qualified for these jobs that exist in the market. And that's why it's important to know this. And it's important to address this. I work in a lot of different things. That doesn't make me qualified. Right now, I have a PhD in archaeology and a PhD in earth sciences. Am I an archaeologist? No. Am I a geologist? No. Will that allow me to get a job in a company in doing archaeological excavations? No. Will it allow me to get me a job in a geology kind of field? Will I be a person that's doing mining or something like that? No, because I haven't worked in mining ever. You understand, this is a problem. We are something that we're not anything. We're not a scientist, and we're not a person from social sciences in most cases. We are something that's a hybrid. And right now, the market doesn't have a place for us. And this is something that needs to be addressed by all of us to make it possible, because we are doing a very important job, a valuable job. Like Susan says, it's very important. It creates jobs, it creates knowledge. Heritage is something that's important for all of us as people, as community, as regions. It's important to preserve. It's important to pass on to generations. I think everyone acknowledges this, even in the European Union. So this is something that's well known. But then what happens is that on a day-to-day basis, we've created people which are very important for this global economy and for this very important subject, which is heritage. But then we don't know what to do with them, because they're not being absorbed into companies, they're not being absorbed into academia. And so we're just making very, very qualified, unemployed people.
Yep.
Okay,
And
now
also
I would
being
like
the
to have
best
Anna.
being the
Anna
best
did
is
not
also very
speak.
intangible.
Please, Anna.
Okay, I have to say Mafalda is the best, but please give me 5 minutes to speak. So she is the best in her field. So mind that, you will see her still with a job. I like to say hello to you all. Most of you I have either worked with or took your lessons. So I'm a direct product of you. So I hope that you recognize that. I want to toss one thing that was mentioned, but kind of briefly, and I don't want it to be skipped out in definitions, and that's my favorite dirty word, archaeology, because again, when we are talking about conservation science and cultural heritage sciences, or archaeometry or archaeological sciences, they can have different agendas and sometimes agendas that are directly in conflict. For example, I work on organic materials that are very sensitive, and at this moment, I'm in a race with conservators who are preserving stuff, and every minute that I'm here with you, I'm losing some of the material. And even though they very much are curious and understand the process, they have a job to do, which is to preserve the object. Organic material is not recognized as an object as such. So it's a problem, and I don't think we can all go under umbrella of conservation sciences. There is another side of this coin, and that is coming from archaeology. You all worked on wonderful projects, but those projects were mostly not written by you, but you were involved to these projects as a natural science, from a natural sciences field. And I don't think you should value yourself only as a data production place, but actually as a hub for integrated projects that can answer big questions. And I think what we are butting our heads today here is with the terminology of interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity, which is the term that is used and loved by all because it sounds wonderful. But in the real world, it is not so easy to incorporate. And then we get to the point where everybody gets very, very agitated, and that is funding. And I don't mean the funding in a sense that we all need more money for projects. We do. We need a job, we need a payment, and we also need the funding for projects. But the problem here that you can all address is that the funding applications, the funding panels are structured in a European Union at this moment that you have to apply to a certain field, which sometimes transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary projects are not evaluated in a good sense. And if you choose the wrong panel, if you choose geology instead of archaeology, if you choose, I don't know, mobility in ERSAR, you will not be graded in well. And since I believe a lot of you sit on evaluation panels and you can influence that, I think it's important to address how money is allocated, because we all know without money, without funding, there is no jobs, there is no growing of this field or integrating of this field. And also, we cannot answer the big questions, because it's not only what is this material made of anymore. It's we have the ability to answer the big questions about humanity and materials that we created. And last thing that I want to point out, I think from this panel is very much evident that there are various educational programs, which some of them I enjoyed. And maybe you should list them all out on the continents and on certain countries, because there are various different pathways that we can take now. So it would be nice that there is a resource where a person can see what educational programs are available at this point, because in the last 10, 20 years, they are growing. And every year there's one more and it's being funded. So it's being funded for something. So that's all. Thank you.
Hannah, I'm sorry to interrupt, and I'm sorry you have your hand raised, but you mentioned archaeology. In fact, I'm possibly one of the persons that is here working on a private company. We don't have funds. We rely on private clients or funded by the government, but they are privately given. Basically, the company where I work for, I'm the head of the conservation department. However, this company started 25 years ago, and it's called Archaeology. It is an archaeology company. And because of the issues they were starting to have right from the beginning, 25 years ago, that they were collecting objects, that they needed to preserve them on site, they realized that they needed the support of a conservation restorer or department, in order to help them out. And that's why this archaeology company headed, a conservation department on it, in order to be able to work properly, not in, so there is a combination.
Yeah, I know. My company has a conservation
this is not the only
department
this is
as
not
well.
the only company that works like
I
this in
know.
Portugal. Several of them work like that.
I know, and I'm not saying this. I'm saying that the questions coming from the archaeologist, coming from heritage scientists, and the restorer or conservator can be different. My company also has conservation department, actually 2 or 3, because of the materials, different materials, and I'm working closely with 2 restorers at this moment. But for them, we have the same PI, we have the same archaeologist who directs the work. But I want to save things so I can analyze them. Conservators have deadlines and they need to preserve the material as soon as possible. Of course, if certain treatments are employed, then the analysis is a little bit more complicated. So that's what I'm saying. There is this butting of heads in a sense. I work with them very nicely. They are very nice people that I know for 10 years. So it's not a personal problem. It's an objective problem. And also, I do consider, even though I have a very diverse educational background, I do consider myself as an archaeologist. And I don't feel comfortable presenting myself as conservation scientist because sometimes I destroy, sometimes I analyze, sometimes I give information to the restorers, sometimes they give information to me. But this is what I'm saying. I'm saying that, yes, we all need to stick together and work together. But the terminology, if Nick publishes something or letter or report, I want archaeology to be included. And it was mentioned already by Mattia. Yuval is also an archaeologist. Thomas's and Mafalda's projects are archaeology projects because they are dealing with society, with bigger questions, not only material. And I think that is important to be mentioned and not just slide by. Because title of this panel today is conservation science. And
definitely.
Thank you. Yuval, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I know that after I'll say whatever I have to say, the millennials here will say, okay, boomer, that's what you say. But the questions that, or whatever, the emotions that you express now are exactly the emotions I felt when I finished my PhD 31 years ago, not yesterday. And actually, I was trained in archaeology. I did a BA in archaeology and I started the MA and I fell in love with ceramic petrography. At that time in Israel, there was only one more person who did it, who was a PhD candidate in geology. And in the meantime, now she's a very famous geologist, but of course she left the field. And I never believed that anybody would pay any attention to it. But when I finished the MA and started publishing articles and started the PhD on the same topic, after of course taking studies in geology too, when the Antiquities Authority was established, they created a job for a petrographer. I established my second laboratory in petrography, and I worked there for 7 years until the Tel Aviv University took me for an academic position in this field, that in the meantime, there were more people. And so I was able to leave my first PhD student as a replacement to me to keep the position in the Antiquities Authority. Now there are 2. And speaking today, of course, we are a small country of 9 million people altogether. In every university, there is at least one position specifically for a ceramic petrographer in every institute of archaeology. So it tells you something. Now, of course, I'm not restricting myself to ceramic petrography anymore because I've studied more disciplines on the way. And so I can call myself an archaeological scientist, or again, whatever name we give it. And just counting the names, and it's developing more and more, at least in my country. Now in Haifa University, they built a faculty for archaeology, or a school for archaeology, with 4 departments, one of which is for conservation and conservation research, the whole department, and one of them is for scientific archaeological science. And of course, no student will specialize just on, I mean, PhD students can specialize on one field, but you know, the undergraduate students will take courses from all the 4 departments. And I think this is what is necessary today for every archaeology student. And maybe, for sure, some of them will find a way to become archaeological scientists. So it's, you know, you have to see these things in a retrospect, in a historical point of view. And yes, the ones of you who will become not only the best, because there is only one who is the best, but the good ones, the ones with the fire in their eyes, will be able to find a job eventually.
Thank you, Yuval. I think that, of course, I do understand the problem of the job creation, but sometimes you have to create your own job, which is difficult. I mean, we all went, I mean, it seems that we here in the academia, we had a nice life and we got in the academia easy and we had a good salary. No, it's not like that. Finding a job has been difficult for all of us, as Herman was saying, actually. And sometimes you have to be inventive and you need a bit of luck as well, but you need to be inventive and not rely on other people giving you money. I think that the attitude should be, I'm not going to ask people to give me a job, but I will try to put myself in the situation of creating also a job. This, I think, if I'm not wrong,
yes, Nick, but here we have the greats here in the panel. We have some people who have been in this business for a long time, and nobody is asking here for a job. We are asking the way that you can influence more funding in a field that doesn't exist yet, because you have created it. And this can be...
This is what we are trying to do. I mean,
I know.
Okay, also, Remy wanted to just say something because in fact, politicians are not here and the politicians are important.
Ciao, Chiari.
Ciao.
Is that correct if I speak later?
Ciao, Giacomo.
Ciao. Ciao.
Ciao, Giacomo. Ciao. Do you want to come here?
No, it's all right if I can speak from here. Is that all right? Okay. No problem. Just a short comment, adding some information to what has been said. And of course, looking for a job is the main topic for the young ESR. And we have one close to here and the second one, many others on the table here. Maybe something that they don't know about is the way we work. Herman and Yuval have described their own personal way into the academic institutions. Actually, I could give the same example on my own, but I will not. Anyway, what you have to know, it's for Anna, it's for Sri and the others here in the room, and I don't know the name of the others, but our job is not only to get a creation of master degrees, to get into disciplinarity, and then to get a PhD program, to enlarge the thing to the international way, I mean, side. And but we are now thinking about PhDs. I mean, everything we are doing is trying to make this thing more and more visible. Visible has been a word that has been used at the beginning. I don't know who mentioned that, but that is very important, of course. And I think everybody is doing it either for himself, because you need to be strong yourself to help the others. And then for the others, I have one example very quickly in my group. Actually, there is a guy who made his doctorate, who performed his doctorate into Greek antiquities. He had some capacities also and some skills in 3D technologies. And very recently, I had the chance to offer him a position of 3D postdoc because, and thanks to his new ability that is 3D. And then he's back by chance to another topic that is Greek antiquity. So that's the way life is constructed. Never ask for everything that is going to be perfect. Herman mentioned is the chemistry way and then into laser things. I could say the same with luminescence studies and now going into 3D technologies and other stuff. My best friends are archaeologists, art historians, philologists at the moment. I never
or apart from this group, never talk with the guys into physics or chemistry, which is my background actually. So I would say work, skip to your skills, add more, keep motivated. That's the light in the eyes that Yuval was mentioning. And well, with ongoing PhD, you will find situation and we will help you because that's one of our responsibilities. I mean, I feel this thing like that. Thank you.
Remy, it is not your responsibility for all of us, but I'm thankful for everything that you are doing. I just want to stress again, it is not about the individual professors, but I want it to be recognized as a field that current situation in European Union about funding. Again, we are coming to transdisciplinarity or interdisciplinarity. Funding is still disciplinary. You apply to a certain panel that is focused on a certain background or topic, which can be chemistry, which can be geology, which can be conservation or art history. And the funding goes like this. There is no panel or funding for this specific type of field. And this is what I'm addressing. And hopefully things in years, now they are getting more.
Anna, I don't understand really what you are saying.
If
Since the beginning of the Artec project, Hyperion CH, Hyperion HS, and the future European restructure in heritage science, we have been funded by the Social Science and Humanities panel.
Yes, and you applied to humanities panel. Mafalda is geologist. Should she apply to geology because methods that she uses?
No, you are not right. You are not. I am a chemist. I never got funded.
Because you will never get funded. That's what I'm saying.
I never got funded from the chemistry panel because I was dealing with conservation, restoration, and so on.
Yes, this is what I'm talking about.
I applied to the social science and humanities, and
shouldn't it make sense for there to be a funding that's going specifically for heritage? This is what Anna is saying. Shouldn't there be a way for heritage to be recognized?
It comprises also heritage in science. Inside.
Yes,
but heritage science is more than just
yes,
humanity.
I think you should be Mafalda.
Heritage is within social science.
And Anna, I think, as Rocco says, which I fully agree with him, I think you should read what funding is taking place in the European Union, for example.
Exactly.
Do you want to look at the panels that European Research Council at this point offers?
Okay, no, let me clarify to you. The European Research Council is completely different. This is really, I agree with you. This is, it starts to be now, for the first time, they put material science, for example, after all these years. Yes, but that's only the European Research Council. The funding is much larger in other programs. And then you have
national
funding,
funding.
Said, you have
national
funding specifically
in some
for
nations don't exist.
Well, let me finish. Let me finish. This is all in the books. We have this sent by our experts in European funding. And we have funding specifically for cultural heritage. We had it for the last, for many years, and now it's increased.
National funding,
and so I
Spain
think you should
funding.
check. No, it's funding, it's funding cultural heritage programs, which are multidisciplinary. And they asked you to even put AI, that means artificial intelligence. They asked you to automate. They asked you, now they're doing a lot on characterization within cultural heritage and archaeology and all this. So funding is there. I agree completely with Rocco.
Excellent.
So
okay. Since
you may not
there
find
are
the
so
funding
many
because
of
maybe
you here, can we also then join the list of available fundings for this type
But
of...
it is very simple, Anna. Just go to the European 2020 webpage where there are the calls, and you will realize that there are calls that probably will be open that are already, some have been already expired, but there will be others opening till October, November, till February in the field of heritage. So in the
I
field of
agree
cultural
that there are
heritage.
funding. Yes, there have been lately, there have been certain calls for heritage. I'm not even disagreeing with that. It's true. I'm saying that in many cases, locally, especially, that we have a problem where heritage is not considered a specialty.
That's another issue.
Yes, I agree that locally it can be like that. But I mean, in order to
Yes,
get
but
funding,
if
I mean,
here this is an international panel. If we can agree that this is an issue, then maybe locally we can start making specific changes.
I mean, our job,
that's all I'm saying.
Our job, me, Rocco, Herman, and Remy, is to lobby in Brussels to produce program in agricultural heritage. And we have been doing this for many years, and we have been successful because now they are coming out. Because there was a moment, and I think Rocco will know exactly, where there was a crisis, and it seems that the European Commission was cutting cultural heritage, and we were all mobilizing to just say no. You have to put insert cultural heritage and heritage science. So we are doing a job, but we expect the people that come out from PhD programs to do theirs. So, and you cannot ask us, give us a list. No, you have to find a list. I mean, it can take a week, 2 weeks, because it's a mess, the European Commission sites. But do it yourself, and then come to us and say, listen, I found this. Can we actually, you have the network, and the network of Archmat, the network of Harris. Can we actually do a project on this? I can write, I can contribute to the writing.
Nick, moreover, Hannah has to know that there are national contact points of the European Union. So you can contact directly them, as I'm used to do. If I want to
raise another problem that you don't consider a problem because you had successful projects. Another problem is evaluation of those projects. So depending on the subject or on a panel, the projects are not evaluated. If they are transdisciplinary, they are not always understood and evaluated positively. So this is also something that we can push forward, that transdisciplinarity, that this evasive veil is more accepted, because projects that are more pointed look more manageable and they get a better grading. Projects that are more transdisciplinary encounter this problem. So I'm not saying there are 0 successful projects, there are many, but it's harder and it's something that's worth to fight.
And at this point was clearly raised at the level of the European Union. You are right. It was raised, but it was raised 2 years ago, before the starting of Europe 2020. If you look at the calls of Europe 2020, now the inter, trans, multi, call it however, how you like it, is an issue. It is an added value. If you make them understanding that the partnership of your project is comprising different type of disciplines with different expertise, all of them working towards the same objective. So I am quite positive. I mean, now there is room for improvement. It's just a matter, as we all know, that sometimes it's hard to get the right call for your project, and also to have a good project, to write it with the European language, not in English, but with the European language. For example, you cannot write a program on a project proposal to the European Union without using the word sustainability. If they don't look sustainability, they will even don't read it. No, I am joking, but there is also many of these projects are also approved because they are well written, and because there is already that is another good point, important point.
The partnership is the right one as well, because creating networking and partnership is fundamental.
The panel is very important. Absolutely.
But I think we're having several parallel discussions right now. When it comes to ERC and national funding, again, I'd like to point out that there isn't heritage science or conservation science in board and other categorizations which are followed by those panels.
We know
and
that.
That is a structural issue. And in this, we are no different to any other interdisciplinary field. When it comes to Horizon 2020 funding, we are very, very lucky that there is a social challenge, the social challenge number 2, that understands heritage-related research questions and attempts to do interdisciplinary evaluation. I fully agree with Anna that interdisciplinary evaluation is still misunderstood, but as heritage scientists, we need to be able to communicate to those who we feel we will be evaluating our proposal. So there is a little bit of work to be done on both sides.
Yeah, thank you, Matthias. It's perfect too. I do agree with you as well. I mean, and our job, again, I stress, is to keep lobbying the people who makes the decision, the policymakers, which, as Remy said, unfortunately, did not manage to get into this panel, but they are important important actors that we should convince. Everybody has to do his job.
Sorry, Nick, I'm very sorry, but in 5 minutes I have to leave because I have another important internal meeting that I cannot avoid. We will keep in touch in the afterwards to see how we can better continue.
In fact, they will actually cut the connection also the Burgos here. So okay. I think we are towards the end. I think, okay, it's a very
bye-bye to everybody.
Topic. Thank you very much for being there. Thank you,
ciao,
Rocco.
ciao.
Thank you,
I'm
Mattia.
here if you need my help. Rocco.mazzeo@univo.it. I am used to answer questions. So
we know that you answer.
Ciao, ciao to everybody.
Everybody and then let's keep moving. This is not the end. This is a work in progress. Okay. And thank you very much for the discussion. I wanted a discussion with a little bit of heat. I got it. Thank you to all.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bom dia. Até mais.